Hi folks, welcome to the Prepared Homestead. This is Travis. Thank you all for stopping by to watch. So how's your garden doing? Is it growing pretty good? Is it so far meeting your expectations? Do you even have it in the ground? I know some of you it's still a little too cold to be planting. Some of you may be a little late on getting things out. But for those of you that have, started the process of getting seeds and plants in the ground, how's it going for you so far? And I hope that you're planning on putting out a lot this year and really putting a lot of effort into it. But there seems to be a kind of a problem that I've noticed we're having here at our property, and I've noticed at other places because I'm getting feedback from people across the United States, and it's even getting a little bit of talk in the news. And it has to do with, once again, grand solar minimum. And what we're talking about is the cooler. It's how it's cooling. It's a little cooler than normal. No, it's not ice age cold, but it's definitely a little bit cooler. And most importantly, in several places across the United States, the soil temperature is cooler than normal. And that is very, very critical when it comes to growing your vegetables. You may have surface temperatures that are nice and warm, but if the soil, at around 6 inches, if it's still cool, those plants, a lot of them especially, are really not going to do very well. And so I want to talk about that today, of how, once again, we're seeing strong evidence indicating that we are in a grand solar minimum. And since we're kind of in the beginning of it, it very well could continue to worsen, and it's going to interfere with the amount of food that you can grow individually, but most importantly, how nations can grow food and how the amount that they can grow, and that's where it gets into the catastrophic levels. Before we get started, if you wouldn't mind going ahead and clicking that like and subscribe button down on the bottom, it does help promote the channel a little bit and get our videos shown, and it doesn't cost you a dime. It takes very little effort, to very little energy is involved to click on the like button and the subscribe button, and we'd sure appreciate it if you do that. So, onto this grand solar minimum and the temperatures, especially soil temperature. I've thought that one of the things that's probably kept a lot of people from really being aware and awakened to the grand solar minimum and the effects that's happening now and the effects that's going to happen over the next couple of decades, and causing people to kind of wake up and get prepared for it, is I think initially there was too much fear selling on it, that it was going to be a little ice age, little mini ice age. And so I think in a lot of people's minds, still today, they're thinking that, come on, there's no ice age coming. I mean, and in their minds, they're thinking, everything covered in ice, large portions of North America and in Northern Europe and Northern Asia, looking like Antarctica, where it's just covered in ice, all year long, and frigid cold temperatures where you can just fall over dead outside because it's so cold. The thing is no one's ever actually said that. That's, in fact, not what a grand solar minimum is. It's a very different thing than an ice age. The mini ice age thing is just kind of a slang term that's used to describe it. The reality is a grand solar minimum, because of it lowering surface temperatures, really not that much, but just a little bit, it can cause your growing seasons to change. It can cause challenges in producing foods that you normally produce in a normal growing season. And what it does is it shortens it. For a small home gardener, it may be a little frustrating that your tomatoes are taking a little bit longer to grow and produce, and your squash and beans and things like that. But on a large scale, when we're dealing with modern farming that produces so many tons and tons of food for the whole world, shortening that growing season and lessening potentially the amount of harvest can be very catastrophic. And that's where we get into the worry that the grand solar minimum is going to have a really massive geopolitical problem in the very near future, which is also why many of us believe that a lot of the things that we're seeing with the Great Reset could very well possibly be done because they're aware of this grand solar minimum. I wanted to, I started thinking about this video because just my own experience right here with our garden. We've got a lot of the garden out, and some of it's been out for a couple of weeks, and some of it, let's just say plants that were already starter plants, and they're not dead or anything. It's not cold enough to freeze them. They're just not growing. In fact, they pretty much haven't grown one bit since we put them in the ground. And this is good soil. We have river bottom soil that we've amended with a lot of composted chicken manure and composted sheep manure. So it's a good, rich soil. Nothing is really wrong with the soil. They're getting plenty of water, but yet not really too much. It drains quite well. The problem is the soil temperature. The soil temperatures here in this area are, hovering around 8 and even 10 degrees below normal. And this time of the year where the soil temperature goes from being just a little too cool for garden plants to grow to being just warm enough for them to grow, a 5 to 10 degree temperature variation is quite significant. It means the difference between a plant actually growing and a plant just being kind of, stuck in limbo and alive, but not really growing at all. And that's what we're seeing happen here. And I kind of wondered, I thought, is this just a rare thing that's happening here? Because we should be plenty warm enough right now on an average year. The soil should be warm enough that plants are going to start growing, and it's not right now. And so I started checking around. I've had a few people comment here on YouTube and on Twitter, and I've asked around, and people are saying that they're finding the same problem. Now, I'm not saying this is everywhere. I don't believe everyone's having this problem, because there are certainly some areas that have above normal temperatures. But there's certainly plenty of areas that the temperatures are below normal, to the point that either they're not quite warm enough yet, or they're just now starting to warm up to where you can start planting, which is 2 or 3 weeks or so behind schedule of where it would normally be. And for instance, like here, the average nighttime temperature for the month of May here is around 55 degrees. And so that's where we should be at night for our surface temperatures. And tonight, and at least for the next week, and it has been this way for almost a week now, our nighttime lows are hovering between 40 and 44 degrees. So we're talking about anywhere between a 5 and a 10 degree lower temperature than we would normally have this time of the year, and which is causing the soil temperatures to not warm up like they should. We have plenty warm days. We've hit 80 several times here, and we're typically in the 70s. But we're just not getting the soil temperature. We're also dealing with that back in February, when we had that really cold spell, and we had a bunch of snow, about 8 or 9 inches of snow, and for about a 2-week period, we were really cold with a lot of snow. So we were much colder than normal with snow on it. So I think what happened then is probably the soil temperatures dropped even lower. And I know that for a fact because I talked to a guy that I know that works for one of the local water departments, and they were having water pipes that were at normal, at the levels underground that's below the frost level. And those water pipes in some places were freezing. So the temperature got so cold for so long a period of time during that period that the frost level, the freeze level, was lower than normal. So what that means is it's going to take a little bit longer for that soil to warm up. And then, a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, we had another snow and cold spell that was very abnormal. So the problem that we're having and we're seeing in some places is cold temperatures, colder than normal. And I want to look at this. We've got another cold spell coming through this weekend that a lot of the United States is going to be seeing colder than normal temperatures. Same here, even all the way down into Texas, you're going to see cooler than normal. Now, this isn't like a freeze or a cold winter or something like that. It's just cooler than normal for the second week of May. There's articles about soil temperatures just not being at the level that they need to be over the last couple of weeks up in Indiana and in other places in the United States. That they're not necessarily worried about it so much. They're just, saying that, hey, we're not able to get the corn in the ground at the time that we normally do, or the beans, or whatever it is. Talked to another farmer around here that he does a big hay business, and he said that he's thinking that hay is going to be a little bit harder to get, at least for a while. The first cutting is a little later than normal, is what they're expecting. He said the hay is just not at the height that it should be at this time of the year. These are problems that's going to be affecting all kinds of prices. We're already seeing corn prices and soybean prices shoot way up. Brazil, they're having problems with their first harvest of corn. Is pretty much was no good, and they've got a second harvest coming in, but between the drought problems down there, so that's affecting it. We're also still getting effects by just logistics. The shipping is slowed down. There's ships out in the ocean still in California. The whole storage container crisis, where there's just not enough storage containers to move things around. All this stuff is affecting the whole industry. A lot of these businesses, they still don't have enough people to fill all the shifts, because too many people are still living off of the unemployment, too afraid to go to work, or just not wanting to go to work because they're making more money sitting at home. This is all has the potential to be a perfect storm. And so I don't want to come across at least what's going on this year and make it sound like that this grand solar minimum this year is going to be absolutely catastrophic. We're in the first couple of years of it. And so it may not be super catastrophic, but I think we're already seeing the effects of it by having cooler than normal. Most of the northern hemisphere, pretty much the entire northern hemisphere, Russia, Europe, Germany's reported the coldest winter and the coldest spring in the last few decades. Same thing in the UK and Russia. Here in the United States, we've seen colder temperatures than we've seen in the last 40, 50 years. If this pattern continues, and we're seeing it, and especially if it gets worse, where our planting time comes later and later in the year, and maybe in the fall the cool time comes earlier too. So what it does is it shortens that harvest and that grow season. You could start seeing some major negative effects to the entire food system here in the United States. We could see crop shortages, lessened harvests because of that. And not including all the other things that are other factors, the shipping container and all that kind of stuff that's being affected. So this is why I repeat often to grow your own food, produce and preserve your own food. It's really important. Right now corn is higher than it's been in almost forever, and soybeans is up, and they're talking about it could go even higher. This is going to greatly affect the food that you buy, food that's already going up. There's already inflation. There's already inflation because of weakened dollar and increased debt and all these other factors that are going on right now over the past 12 months. That's been this big, gigantic snowball going downhill, just gaining speed and size. And then you dump on top of that a grand solar minimum where, the plants, the crops just aren't able to produce as much because the weather has changed, because everything is so finely tuned in our agricultural system that when it changes just a little bit, even just not being able to plant crops for 3 or 4 or 5 weeks, or planting them that much time later, and maybe the end of the season comes earlier, that's going to have a great effect. And so this is why we have to prepare. This is why you need to be growing your own food, preserving your own food, but you need to also have the tools to do that, which is why I encourage, investing in hoop houses and high tunnels or greenhouses, something to help extend your growing season. They don't have to be dramatically big or anything. It doesn't take that much to get some, half-inch PVC and some fittings and some plastic just to cover each row. You don't have to have some big, huge, a greenhouse or something that's just tall enough to just cover the row, that can help heat up that soil and heat up the plants a little bit. Whatever is in your budget, whatever your budget is, there's probably a way that you can find something to help extend your growing season within your budget, because it's not as difficult as you think. And building a greenhouse or building a hoop house or a high tunnel homemade isn't difficult either, with either PVC or cattle panels or stuff like that, which those things have gone up in price too. PVC's gone up, cattle panels, the steel's gone up, the plastic for the plastic sheeting and greenhouse sheeting, it's gone up. The point is, folks, is I think we're finally starting to see the real effects that many of us, including myself, have been talking about for years now, about this grand solar minimum. And it's very unfortunate that it's happening at the same time as many other things that are going to greatly interfere in the whole system. You know, not just agriculture, but everything. So this is why we have to prepare. You know, I'm not on here trying to blow this up and get everyone afraid. And I'm certainly not saying that this year, because of grand solar minimum, you know, will be a catastrophic apocalyptic year. But if you think about it, how tightly tuned and finely tuned the whole system is, if this happens over a period of the next 10 to 20 years, and maybe it gets worse, we're going to start seeing the effects, which is, I believe strongly, it's why we're seeing all these policies being put into place on a global stage of, you know, build back better and the great reset. We need to, you know, take the opportunity now to reset our system, to reset our food system, to reset our, you know, economical systems and all this kind of stuff, because they see it coming. If you do more research, I've done plenty of videos on it, and there's other people that's done videos on them, that if you look back into history, these grand solar minimums, when they happen about every 400 years or so, they play a great effect in the rise and fall of nations. They can, you know, it greatly affects civilization, just because of how they change agriculture, how they change the ability for people to produce the food that they're normally used to producing. So, folks, I can't stress enough how I believe this is a very serious thing, and it needs to be taken seriously, and you need to make it probably one of your top priorities in preparing, and because it's coming at us. I mean, we're seeing the signs of it all over. It amazes me that they're still pushing this global warming and warming temperatures, when even NASA recently came out with information, data showing that the Earth is cooling. That it's the temperatures this year have been cooler than they've, you know, been in the last several decades. That it's not it's not doing the whole global warming thing like they say. And so I'd say, this is a little side note, and then I'll finish. For those of you that stuck around this long, what I think is going to happen is they're going to come out and finally say, oh yes, the Earth is cooling, but guess what? It's cooling because all these lockdowns and shutdowns we did for the health crisis worked. It worked at reducing emissions and reducing Earth's temperature. So guess what? We need to keep that up even when the health crisis is over. We need to keep all these lockdowns in place to save the environment. That's what I think is going to happen. All right, folks, let me know how your gardens are doing. Go out and test your soil temperature. Look it up online. You can usually find, most states have testing places that produce the data online, where you can figure out what the soil temperature is in your area. Let me know what you find out, and if it's warmer or cooler, or if it's just normal. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.